Hello internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and you are looking at Fridays Live at Midnight. So, a few announcements. So next week I am going to be doing the live broadcast from Station Head, Eclectic Music Geek podcast. And next week, we're going to be celebrating the life of the King of Pop, Michael Jackson. It was during that time period that we that he transitioned. I'm also going to be in keeping with my year-long celebration of the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Lord, forgive me. I am also going to be doing a dedication to a movement in hip hop called Native Tongues. So if you know anything about the different movements in hip hop, I remember at one point there was a time when the whole hip hop movement, like people have a tendency to want to do, with genres of music that are largely black, there's a tendency to like to tar all of us with the same brush. And so when people do that, it kind of really bothers me because hip hop, just like every other genre, has branched out. So, like, today I was in a store and I heard someone play Rapper's Delight, the Sugar Hill Gang, the long version. And I was surprised at how many of the lyrics I knew. So it felt good to be able to say them and everything. It felt good to hear. Like I was telling someone in the store, I'm like, now this is the good old days. Okay. When music made you want to get on the floor and dance and have a good time and party and all of that happy stuff there. So the only thing about the gangsta genre of hip hop is that everybody in hip hop that even rapped a couple of, two little syllables together got labeled gangster. Like I said before, there's a tendency when a movement is largely black to not recognize that it has that it branched out. So when gangster showed up, and, through no fault of gangster, this, how somebody else sees you and someone else's distorted vision of you is not always your fault. It still kind of ticked me off because, people didn't like the lyrics. They felt like they were disrespectful to women. And I have to say, some of the artists and some of the lyrics I felt like were disrespectful to women. But because I had been around since I'm a day oneer with the genre of hip hop, I know the difference between the different artists. And so during the period that I'm talking about, many people, got into the whole gangster movement, which started off with Ice-T and went into, and I have to say, Ice-T really never was all that disrespectful to women in his lyrics, if you listen to a lot of his stuff. So that also went into NWA and the artists that branched out of them. So during that same time period, that also would have been, who was the Me So Horny people? Luke Skywalker, also Uncle Luke, and his people. So you had a lot of suggestive lyrics and people saying, calling women I call it the bees and hoes movement, because a lot of women were getting called out of their name. And they were kind of representative, they were the group that got into the most trouble, were accused of a great deal of misogyny and chauvinism in their lyrics. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that I was immune to all of them, because there were a few people in that movement that made some pretty good music. And you just kind of had to, either pretend you didn't hear the lyrics, or maybe they had songs where the lyrics weren't that bad. But during that time period, there was also another movement brewing. And that was, I call it, the more socially conscious rappers, or what they call the native tongues music artists. And that would be the people like Tribe Called Quest, Black Sheep, Brand Nubian, and they kind of branched out of Africa Bambaataa movement. So Africa Bambaataa in recent years has come under a little bit of scandal, and I'm going to discuss that too. I will talk about it a great deal more tomorrow, next week, because I have to look up what I need to look up, because I was looking at a thing today under the Dread YouTube channel, and they were discussing the whole thing with Roman Polanski. And they showed an interview with Roman Polanski, and it was quite creepy. Now, me, myself, I'm cis, I only like full-grown men. So I don't have none of these other issues that you hear some of these people talk about having. And as I said before, this was it from the looks of it and the looks of him during that time period. It looked like it was maybe 70s or 80s where they were discussing his past crimes, because, he's not in the country anymore. I don't think he's back in the United States. He kind of ran away from the United States and decided he wasn't coming back to stand trial for his crimes. And if you want to know more about his crimes, you could look up his Wikipedia so that you can get more details on his crimes. I don't want to discuss it right here, right now. But they were talking about the ability to separate the art and the artist, or separate the person's crimes or stuff that they're accused of from the art, like being able to listen to their art with a good conscience, even though when you listen to it, you're basically, if you pay for it, then your money's going into their account, and you're basically paying, financing the lifestyle. Now, I also looked at a thing earlier where they talked about different crimes that cause changes in the law. And they talked about Son of Sam and how, because he tried to write some books, and they talked about no longer how a criminal not being able to profit from his crimes. And so I was like, well, I think that the royalty should go to their victims. I think they should break down. I think they should, royalty should be had, but they shouldn't go to them. They should go to their victims. Their victims should, be able to benefit from any book sales or anything like that, because they're the ones who have taken the L. They're the ones who have taken the loss for what the individuals have done to them. But, that's my opinion. So that's all I'm going to say on the whole Africa Bambaataa thing for tonight, because I don't really want to get into that here. I'd rather get into it next week when I'm actually doing the show, but I will be talking about the native tongues movement. Now, for those of you who remember, I never knew. So when the movement was going on, I didn't call it native tongues. I called it Afrocentric, which I'm also going to discuss Afrocentrism for you next week, because Afrocentrism was more or less a lot of wearing of kente cloth, a lot of wearing of African type clothing. And the purpose of the movement was to educate us as Black people on our African background, the people who we have descended out of. Also to educate us, to give us some pride about being of African descent, to teach us to be proud of our African roots, that we had a purpose before slavery, before the plantation, and some of the ignorance that I've heard out of white supremacy here lately. Lately, I'm like, you can't possibly believe that, right? The people who are acting like they blessed us by bringing us over here and making us slaves. I'm like, you can't possibly believe that you were doing God's work when you did this, right? And really, those falsehoods are one of the reasons why you have a lot of Black people who have a lot of difficulty in embracing Christianity, because of the lies that have been told, all in the name of Christ. You have to be careful what you embrace and what you hear. Like I said I think it was last week or week before last, when I said on one of my last teachings where I said, don't listen to these false teachings that tell you that Black people are cursed, because we're not. Don't listen to anyone that tells you that part of that curse was the treatment that we got during slavery and the treatment that we got post-slavery, that those are part of the curse. None of what happened to us was biblical. Everything that was done to us during the transatlantic slave and the diaspora and all of that other stuff was really all in the name of greed and commerce, okay? Greed and commerce. Us coming over here and working for free. We were property. They call it chattel slavery for a reason, because we were considered to be property. And none of that has anything to do with anything biblical or prophetic. It has everything to do with greed. Just like, you're going to see some churches probably get uncovered for participating in human trafficking. And none of that is prophetic. And none of that is, none of that is prophetic, and none of that has anything to do with anything biblical. It has everything to do with greed, wanting to profit off of of buying and selling human beings. I've seen a lot of prophets try to make the whole thing biblical and try to act like that, Paul's, the missionary journey. If you read the book of Acts, you will see how a missionary journey goes. And typically on a missionary journey, you are not enslaving the other people. Missionaries go, apostles go, and Apostle Paul is an example in the Acts of the Apostles in the book of Acts, where they heard from God. They went into different locations. They set up churches. They won people to Christ. And as they set up churches, they appointed pastors over those churches. And the letters that we have from Paul to the different churches are an example of an apostle keeping in contact with the pastors and the fellowships of those churches. So, it typically we are not enslaving them or making them property. And like I said before, on one of these nights, I'm going to go into the book of, I think it's Onesimus, where it talks about the letter to the slave. I'm not going to go into it tonight because I have to go maybe week after next. But the whole purpose of Afrocentrism during the time that it was going on in the 90s was to teach Black people how to have pride in being the descendant of not just slaves, but that we're not just a descendant of slaves, that we are descendants of kingdoms in Africa, and to instill pride in our color and in our background. Now, it was a good thing. I kind of had to drop away from it for a little bit because it kept me mad on a regular basis, because when you begin to see all of the injustice around you and all of the injustice that the people that are your color are suffering. I remember during that period, a group named X-Clan came to town here in Columbus, and I just happened to be driving home from work during the hour, and they were leading this march, and I looked and I'm like, that looks like X-Clan. And so I went ahead and drove right along with them, but the other traffic that was like behind them as they were leading their march, I was like, I feel like I took part in something. It was awesome. But if you want to look up X-Clan, they were also part of this particular movement. So so next week, I'm going to talk about how the music was used to teach, how they were using their platform to teach and to teach history and to encourage young people to take positive paths and not to take negative paths. So it's going to be exciting, and like I said, we're going to celebrate the King of Pop. I may do like I did with Prince, where I play, a bunch of, some of his greatest hits and do a little bit of background on each song, as far as what went into writing the song and what the song is based on, who wrote it. Because Michael had no shame in his game. He didn't have any problems bringing in, even though he had the ability to write music, he also had no shame about bringing in other writers to, if you were at the top of your game, and most people who were, they got a call from MJ, from Michael. So, it's awesome. I plan on, and, I might throw in another surprise. If I do, I will discuss that this coming Monday. So I want to talk about a few things that so it has come to my attention that, The Little Mermaid. So I'm hearing that The Little Mermaid, the movie, the recent adaptation of The Little Mermaid, hasn't, while it did well here in the box office, it doesn't seem to be doing as well over in Asia, over in Asian. So let me see here. Let me look at these adaptations here. So it seems as though from what I'm seeing, it appears so this, what we're talking about is the recent live action so it still hasn't done too bad. The budget for it has been $250 million, And so far as box office standards go, it has grossed 427.7 million. So it's already doing really well. So let's see the reception. So it says outside of the US and Canada, the opening weekend box office results fell short of expectations, grossing just 63.8 million worldwide. The biggest markets were Mexico, the United Kingdom, and Italy. Brazil and Australia. Its performance in China and South Korea were disappointing at 3.6 million. In China, a country where Disney films tend to gross between 40 and 85 million, and 4.4 million in South Korea. In Japan, where the film did not premiere until June 9th, 5.1 million was earned in its opening weekend. Deadline Hollywood reported that the film was suffering from review bombing online, and that sites just like IMDb in the States had added warnings to, in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Brazil, Mexico, and Allociné in France had added warnings to the rating pages for the film about unusual activity. And it has unusual in quotes. IMDb's warning read, "Our rating mechanism has detected unusual voting activity on this title. To preserve the reliability of our rating system, an alternative weighing calculation has been added." Deadline Hollywood cited these low user ratings as well as backlash over the casting of star Halle Bailey in the title role. In countries such as Korea, China, France, and Germany as contributing factors in the disappointing overseas box office. Al Jazeera similarly attributed the film's poor performance in China to the public's disappointed that a black actress had been, oh my God, with many moviegoers feeling that Bailey did not meet Chinese beauty standards. So I don't know if y'all remember me doing a podcast on cultural appropriation and how I talked about Rihanna's, cover not being being cultural appropriation. I think she Japan. Was that Japan? Because number one, it was paying homage to their culture. They asked her to dress that way. And, to them, it was an honor to have her wearing their clothes. So typically when you've appropriated something, the people do not find it honorable for you to be wearing any of theirs. If anything, they're getting on your case because they feel dishonored. And so I think it's interesting that they're saying she does not meet Chinese beauty standards. Like, Lord have mercy. So I remember during the time that they announced that they were casting Halle Bailey, the whole "Not My Ariel" movement. And to me, the not my Ariel movement was pretty racist. And so so if you look at the background, and so I saw some TikTok. I follow a few YouTube accounts that post TikTok videos where they talk about different topics on their YouTube. So yeah, content creators off of TikTok, where I also have an account. And I thought it was interesting. One Asian woman tried to defend her fellow Asians by saying, well, if somebody, if you saw a white woman playing Mulan, which I'm like, well, Mulan is based on a Chinese tale rooted in their country, about her. She went, if you're familiar with the story, and I am, it's one of my favorite Disney classics. She goes over, she dresses like a man, so you have the whole gender thing going on, and she fights in place of her father, and she goes to, they're fighting with the Huns, and she helps defeat the Huns, and restores honor to her country. And so the father is just concerned and wanting to return her alive, because she wanting her to return home alive, because she was in danger of possibly being beheaded if they'd have found out that she was a woman impersonating a man, because they didn't play that at that particular time. So yeah, you would definitely want that to be a person that's actually from the background that the story is based in. My problem with people getting their nose out of joint with Chloe Bailey, not Chloe, but Halle Bailey, is, well, she's in Denmark. They have black people in Denmark. Denmark is a lot more diverse than what people give it credit for. And, because The Little Mermaid is a Danish fairy tale. And, all Danes are not, her being black or her being white is not central to the story It doesn't really say anything about her background. It doesn't say anything, none of what she's doing is about the culture. It's basically pretty universal. Just about anybody, any color could play that part, because there's nothing about her racial ethnicity that is central to the theme of this story. Now, I thought it was interesting that another Asian commentator said, you're saying, well, you got no business playing it because she's black and the person is supposed to be white. But if they'd have picked an Asian woman to play Ariel, the Asians in the countries that we're discussing would have packed out the theater. Now, it doesn't have any bearing on how I feel about Asians, because the majority of Asians that I know, I still get along with. Okay, and I'm not going to come at them crazy because of what somebody's doing in another part of the world. But I do think it's interesting that it's so controversial. And so you have people, well, what about Black Panther? Well, Black Panther is set in Africa, and it has to do with African Americans, and it is a part that is written for a African American or African to play. So yeah, you would look quite funny being a white person or some other color and deciding that you want to play in that particular movie. Do I think that the backlash is racist? Yeah, it is. Because there's nothing, it would be one thing if Ariel, the only reason that white people over here were protesting Ariel because they felt like she should be white, because in everywhere else that you hear the story of the Little Mermaid, she's white. But her being white has nothing to do with the central story, has nothing to do with the feats that her character performs. And to be perfectly honest with you, it being Disney, they really changed the ending of it. If you knew what Ariel's ending wound up being, actually was before Disney decided to change it, because it would have really messed up a whole lot of little children watching it. You would think a little bit differently. But, her ethnicity, she could do everything that Ariel was able to do in this story as a white character, she could actually do as a black character. It's not the same with some of the other ones where their ethnicity is a central part of the story. So yes, I do think it was a bit racist to say not my Ariel. And I'm like, Lord, I just really do not want Donald Trump back as president, because I really honestly believe that some of the racially polarizing things that are going on in this country are going on because the very, very racist people that supported that presidency came out from whatever rock they were hiding up under and started being nice and bold about their racism. Before, during the Obama years, they were a bit in hiding. I think that they got a little bold because it was a black president, and they were not happy about having a black president. There are times I remember comedian D.L. Hughley asking the question, do you think that Donald Trump is racist white America or white supremacist answer to Obama? I think there was a little bit of revenge there. I wouldn't doubt that there was some revenge there. It was horrible. I do not want that presidency back. I believe he is right now where he kind of should be. I'm not looking forward to having him back. Even when I was okay with him as a person, I was not planning on voting for him the first time. I voted Hillary. I will tell you all day long. And I remember somebody saying, well, I didn't vote Hillary, blah, blah, blah. And they said all this stuff. I'm like, okay, you could have not had confidence in Hillary. I do. But there's no way you could tell me that you felt like Donald Trump was a better choice. I think that, the nation showed its behind. They felt they were not ready to have a woman in that office. And this is why this happened. I really honestly believe that there are people who come for Kamala Harris for that same reason. Okay, I really do. I've seen, the religious crowd. The religious crowd kind of always shows me who they are. Because anytime a woman shows any type of leadership ability, or she's not trying to be submissive, or she actually sticks up for herself when wronged, or shows that she has any type of backbone at all, you automatically hear that tag of Jezebel spirit. Now, I did a podcast on Jezebel, and I talked about how Jezebel teachings, especially when they're aimed at black women, usually have their roots in racism. They really kind of date all the way back to the plantation. And it's really another way of trying to put a woman in her place. Whenever I hear a man talk about a woman needing to know her place, regardless of what the color of the man is, because patriarchal and chauvinism are universal. They're global. Everywhere you go on this globe, you will find males that think that women ain't got no place in leadership. They ain't got no business running things. They don't got no business doing anything, even though men have showed time and time again that they are capable of making an absolute mess. You will still have them people that swear up and down women ain't got no business in leadership. Eh. And it really bothers me when it shows up in Christianity, because 9 times out of 10, you only hear that in abusive churches. You don't never hear it in churches. You don't hardly ever hear it in churches where there's a healthy sense of leadership. You only hear it in churches where they just are hell-bent on keeping women down, keep us out of leadership. And it would be one thing if they felt like leadership was a job for a man if men were doing it well. But 9 times out of 10, the people that you hear protesting against women in leadership are usually leaders that are not leading well, and they are usually abusive and treat everybody like dirt. Why do you feel like women should follow you? This has always been my question for a whole lot of men. Why do you think women should follow you if you don't lead well? In the Bible, where you see the requirements for a bishop and an elder, it says clearly, a man who does not have the ability to run his household well cannot run the household of God or run the household of faith. So why do you feel like you deserve to have a woman follow you when you can't lead without being abusive? When you can't lead, and one of the things that it says in the Bible is that those of you who are qualified to lead must first serve. Not be served, but serve. That you're supposed to have a servant's mentality. So I don't understand these mugs who get all up in their feelings, get all up in their really it's all up in their ego, and think that they automatically qualify. And it's funny to me because you're the first ones to tell women which women don't qualify to be wives and who doesn't qualify to be this, that, or the other. But you're standing there just as unqualified as you possibly can be, and think that you're qualified just for having a penis. I do not understand that mentality at all. It ain't a biblical mentality. It's just you thinking that you're entitled simply because you're male. There's something wrong with that. It's one thing to lead well. But if you don't lead well, why should any woman follow you? So no, I'm not down with this. I heard something very dangerous off of some new ads for Love and Hip Hop. And these girls were saying to this woman, if 10 men call you a hoe, then you a hoe. Okay, who teaching y'all? That's not true. That's not true. First of all, and I keep going back to the scripture where Jesus said he did not entrust himself to men because he knew what was in men. Now, we're not talking just males. We're talking about mankind, which includes both male and female. He did not trust mankind, for he knew what was in mankind. So what does that mean? He knows that mankind has a sinful nature. He knows that mankind can have the propensity to lie. He knows everything that we as human beings are willing to do whenever we want to get our way on something. And let's face it, many men will lie on God. Well, God, every church scandal, every sex scandal in a church that I ever heard of began with a pastor saying that something was God's will that was not God's will. So why would you pin anything on a group of people who keep showing you consistently that they cannot be trusted? Okay, so he knew, and like I said, I'm inclusive of both male and female in that one. We have a sin problem. Okay, women sin to protect men. Okay, how many women have lied to protect a man? How many women have knew a guy was guilty and still lied to protect that man? So when I say mankind cannot be trusted, don't put no confidence in the flesh. Okay? So no, I wouldn't care if 10 men were calling you a hoe. If you're not one, you're not one. And God isn't calling you no hoe. Once you accept Christ, you are a new creature. Old things have passed away and all things are now new. God isn't calling any of his daughters a hoe. He calls you daughter. No matter what any man is out here calling you, God calls you daughter. And what his word has to say about you is more important than what any man has to say about you. What men have to say about you cannot trump what God says about you in his word. And God is not allowing men to lie on you and spread rumors and lies about your sexual behavior. Okay? So don't believe no lies like that. So we got to keep some of these sisters prayed up, because some of y'all are giving men power that God isn't even giving them. You need to be careful of the sin of idolatry. Okay? Like I said before, being submissive is not unconditional. Okay? Love is unconditional. Love is unconditional. Submission is conditional. If they are not your legal husband, they're not to be submitted to. That's number one. But also, if your husband goes and tells you to rob a bank, you have a right to say no to that. You have a right to say no to your spouse asking you to do things that are sinful or that are any type of criminal activity. Like if they're asking you, you marry somebody and you marry, let's say you get married and you used to be a drug dealer, but you no longer dealing. And your wife says, well, why don't you go out here and do a little something to get us some money? You allowed to say no to that. They're asking you to return to your old lifestyle. You have a right to say no to that. If your husband tries to put you out here and tries to get you turning tricks to help out the household, you got a right to say no to that. You have a right to say no to sin. You have a right to say no to criminal behavior, which would be considered sin. Okay? This is what I mean about prioritizing your relationship with God. If it messes up your relationship with God, you have a right to say no to it. Submission is not unconditional. Okay? Submission is conditional. God's promises are conditional. Okay? So you don't want nobody talking you into doing wrong stuff. You have a right to stand up to a spouse who's trying to get you to sin. Don't ever believe that you have to do sinful things to keep your spouse. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get off here. We're rounding into 45 minutes. But I just wanted to get on here and keep my promise to get on here. But I also wanted to discuss some of the stuff that, I'm hearing in the atmosphere, and discuss some of these things. Wherever you are seeing me from this live, because I will be posting it in other places where my live app doesn't accommodate during the live. If you feel the need to comment anywhere you see my lives, feel free to. I would love to have a decent conversation. Don't be rude. If you are disrespectful, if you want to have a decent discussion or you want to ask me any questions about any of the topics that I'm discussing, I'm more than happy to do that. If you are rude and disrespectful, you will get blocked. Okay? Nowhere in my Christianity does it say that I have to entertain rude, disrespectful behavior. So you need to talk to me like you want to be talked to. Or if you're a man, you need to talk to me like you would want somebody talking to the women that you care about. Anyway, I'm going to get off here. You guys enjoy your weekend, and I will see you Monday night at midnight. Have a good one.